It is just after midnight. A single man sits alone in a bunker outside Moscow, staring at a screen that is telling him the United States has just fired nuclear missiles at his country. He has 5 minutes to decide whether to trust it, and every protocol, every order, every piece of training he has ever received is telling him to say yes. He said no, and you are alive because of it. To understand what happened on the night of September 26, 1983, you need to understand just how close to the edge the world already was. This was not the Cuban Missile Crisis. What happened in 1983 was faster, quieter, and in many ways more terrifying, and almost nobody knew it had happened for nearly a decade. The early 1980s had seen US-Soviet relations collapse to their most dangerous point since World War II. US President Ronald Reagan had publicly called the Soviet Union an evil empire and wasn't speaking metaphorically.
Let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
The Soviets, for their part, were convinced that America was preparing a first strike. Their intelligence network, codenamed Operation Ryan, had been set up specifically to look for signs that a nuclear attack was imminent. Soviet commanders were told to watch for unusual American military activity, unusual purchases of blood supplies, lights burning in government buildings in the middle of the night. Then, 3 weeks before our story takes place, something happened that pushed tensions past a point most historians now consider extraordinarily dangerous. On September 1st, 1983, Soviet fighter jets shot down a South Korean passenger aircraft, Korean Airlines Flight 007, after it strayed into Soviet airspace. All 269 people on board were killed, including a sitting US congressman. The world was outraged. Reagan's administration escalated its rhetoric. In Moscow, the leadership felt cornered, convinced the West was building a case to justify military action. And sitting in the Kremlin at the top of all of this was Soviet General Secretary Yuri Andropov, a deeply paranoid man, now gravely ill. Stanislav Petrov was 44 years old. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. He'd been assigned to Serpukhov 15, a top-secret command bunker located south of Moscow. Inside that bunker sat the nerve center of a system called OKO, the Soviet Union's orbital early warning satellite network, designed to detect the heat signature of ballistic missiles the moment they launched from American soil. If an American missile was fired, OKO would see it, and if OKO saw it, Petrov would see it, and he would have minutes, not hours, to decide what to report up the chain. His superiors would then contact the General Staff. The General Staff would contact Andropov, and a decision would be made about whether to fire back before the incoming missiles hit.
It was completely unexpected, as such things usually are. The siren sounded very loudly, and I just sat there for a few seconds, staring at the screen with the word "launch" displayed in bold red letters.
Petrov didn't choose this post. He didn't volunteer for the weight he was about to carry. He just happened to be the man on duty on the night the system broke. Shortly after midnight on September 26th, Petrov settled in for what should have been a routine 12-hour shift. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Operators moved between screens. The bunker hummed. Outside, the world slept. Then, the siren. Across the room, a wall panel Petrov had been trained never to want to see, lit up in angry red letters. One word: launch. The system declared high reliability. It wasn't glitching. It wasn't uncertain. The OKO satellites were telling Petrov with complete confidence that an American intercontinental ballistic missile had just been fired from the United States and was heading toward the Soviet Union. Petrov later recalled those first moments. For 15 seconds, we were in a state of shock. We needed to understand what's next. Then, before he had processed the first alarm, 4 more appeared. 5 missiles, 5 warheads, all heading for Soviet territory. Petrov did not call, not yet. Instead, he did something that the entire system had been designed to make impossible. He thought. He ran through everything the screen was telling him against everything he knew. First, ground-based radar installations, the secondary layer of verification, were showing nothing. No missiles rising above the horizon. The satellites were screaming. The radar was silent. In normal circumstances, a real attack would trigger both. Second, And this was the logic that Petrov later said anchored his thinking. 5 missiles made no strategic sense. He knew his doctrine. He knew American doctrine. If the United States was genuinely launching a first strike against the Soviet Union, they would not fire 5 missiles, they would fire hundreds. You don't start a nuclear war with 5 warheads. You end the argument in 1 strike. 5 missiles wasn't an attack. 5 missiles was an anomaly. He was not certain. He said so himself in every interview he ever gave. He was not certain at all. He was making a judgment call under the most extreme pressure a human being can experience in under 5 minutes, with the fate of millions resting entirely on whether his instinct was better than his training.
A minute later, the siren went off again. The second missile was launched, then the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. And then I made my decision. I would not trust the computer.
He called it a false alarm. He told the duty officer. The message went up the chain. And then he waited. He was right. The investigation that followed traced the false alarm to a single satellite, Cosmos 1382, which had interpreted the reflection of sunlight off the tops of high-altitude clouds as the heat signature of missile launches. The glitch was real. The software was later rewritten. The missiles were never there. Now you might expect what comes next to be a celebration, a ceremony, a medal. A man raised up by his country for the courage to think when everything around him said, "Don't." That is not what happened. The Soviet military kept the incident completely secret. Acknowledging a near-catastrophic false alarm in their flagship early warning system was not something they were willing to do. And Petrov? In the days after the incident, while a special commission investigated, he was reprimanded. Not for saving the world, but for failing to fill out his logbook correctly on the night in question. He was later reassigned. He retired quietly. He moved to a small flat near Moscow. His wife Raisa, the person closest to him, the one who might have understood what he'd carried, died of cancer in 1997. Petrov spent years alone in that flat, not famous, not celebrated, not even officially acknowledged by the government, whose existence he had almost certainly preserved. He gave interviews in later years where he was asked repeatedly whether he felt like a hero. He always said the same thing. He said he was just doing his job. The world only found out what had happened after the Soviet Union collapsed. When the story finally emerged, it travelled slowly at first, a mention here, an academic paper there. Then, in 2006, Petrov received an award from the Association of World Citizens. In 2013, he was given the Dresden Peace Prize. A documentary about his life featuring Kevin Costner was released in 2015. For a brief window at the end of his life, the world seemed to notice him. On the 19th of May 2017, Stanislav Petrov died at home in his flat near Moscow. He was 77 years old. The news of his death did not become public for several months. It was discovered almost by accident when a German activist trying to reach Petrov to wish him happy birthday reached his son Dmitry instead. Historians who study nuclear near misses place the 1983 incident alongside the Cuban Missile Crisis in terms of how close it came. The difference is that the Cuban Missile Crisis lasted 13 days and involved the leaders of 2 superpowers. The 1983 incident lasted 5 minutes and involved one man sitting alone at a desk. One man who, by every rule he had been given, should have made a different call. One man who decided that 5 missiles didn't add up. And in the gap between what the machine said and what a human being reasoned, in that gap, the world survived. History is full of battles, leaders, and turning points that fill textbooks. But some of the most important moments in human history happened in silence, in bunkers, at night, by people whose names most of us never learned. Stanislav Petrov is one of those people, and now you know his name. If you want more stories like this, the people and moments that history almost forgot, subscribe to Forgotten History. The next one is just as extraordinary. I'll see you there.